seeing new cell phone bans pop up all across the country. There really are two sides, very, very heated sides to the cell phone ban.
We need to look at allowing our children to have cell phone privileges, but taking away the smartphone access.
One of the things that underlines is the need for childhood independence and the need for kids to fail a little bit.
You get likes for being mean. You get likes for trolling.
When you make something taboo just for making it taboo, you're already kind of rallying up the natural kid instinct to rebel against you.
This is my personal choice, and I'm sending my kid to a public school. I pay taxes. You can't take away my cell phone.
There are economic differences. Kids that don't have access to as many resources have a higher degree of reliance on their smartphones.
I say this with absolutely no judgment for any parent out there. Like, it is tough to just keep your head above water.
We have so much more work to do.
We're so glad that you did. This is Raising America on the Hill. I'm your host, Elizabeth Prann. I'm a journalist as well as a mother of three very adorable, although occasionally feral children. Speaking of kids,
it's not good for the kids. They're going to be very upset about it, and I believe they will find ways around it.
Have you heard? Well, maybe not. Maybe you were on campus where the ban is already in effect. Is this thing on? I'm talking about a cell phone ban on K through 12 public schools across the country. Certainly there's a range. See what I did there?
The transition will be a little rough at start as always, but change is hard.
School is back in session, and for the first time in these kids' lives, there is some type of restriction of usage, whether the phone is jammed or it goes in a pouch, or maybe there's a cell phone hotel, or it's bell to bell. 31 states are either in process or already on board.
Students should be engaged, and they should be focused, and they should be connecting with the learning, but connecting with each other.
Mom and New York Governor Kathy Hochul says this is going to save education. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has signed the Bell-to-Bell No Cell Act, meaning from the second the kids get to school to the second they leave, they are not allowed to use their cell phones. But not everyone is cheering.
How do I get a hold of my child in case of an emergency or the need to talk to them right away? We have solutions for that.
So wait a second. What is the solution? What is the long-term plan? Look at what happened in Michigan. Democratic lawmakers shot down a ban there under the guidance of Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Concessions and demands and restrictions simply were not met. The fact of the matter is, we live and die for this digital tool. Kids can tell you that they get their instructional materials, their homework on this phone. They tell their parents when to pick them up. And parents say, we live in this post-Columbine world. We need it for safety. So today we're going to dig into the data. We're going to talk to educators. And most importantly, we're going to be talking to parents to unpack what the impact is on this generation, where politics is making parenting much more complicated than it needs to be. Remember, we as moms and parents, we're the real majority. Thank you all for joining us. Let me start with introductions. I have Dr. Annette Anderson, the Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Safe and Healthy Schools. I have Mark SooHoo. He is working on the Wait for Eighth campaign. He's located in the Midwest part of the United States. And last but not least, I have Kurt Bardella. He is a NewsNation contributor. You might know him as the host of the podcast Kurt's Country. He's also done a lot of political work in the past. But most importantly, his title here today is our staple parent, although all of us today. So, Mark, I want to start with you. You being sort of in the middle of the country, and I know that obviously Kurt's in Dallas as well, but you're working on this campaign. It's been growing and growing for really years now. Simultaneously, we're seeing new cell phone bans pop up all across the country. Are you seeing really an uptick in support for your campaign now that we're seeing these bans?
Yeah, absolutely. Wait Until 8th is a national movement with more than 120,000 parents who've pledged to wait until the end of 8th grade to give their children smartphones. And we've really seen a huge uptick, especially in the past year after the release of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. That really turned a lot of parents on to the negative consequences of smartphones and social media on our kids. And it's really helped our movement grow to, as I said, 120,000 pledges across all 50 states. So you go to our website, waituntil8th.org, and parents can join together with other parents in their community to let kids be kids a little bit longer.
You know, Dr. Anderson, I've read a lot of your work online because there really are two sides, very, very heated sides to the cell phone ban. There's 31 states that have some type of ban, and it's different, right? Some people are bell to bell, some people are instructional periods only, so it varies depending on where you live. But what I thought about your work is that it went so much deeper into
Yes.
are we teaching our children to self-regulate by telling them from 8:30 to 2:30 you have no cell phone usage?
I think you've raised a wonderful point, and I think that we have so much more work to do. Number one, I would say that there's not any gold star standard in terms of a randomized trial to say how cell phone usage amongst adolescents and children is disrupting childhood. I think we have an intuition that it's doing that. And so I applaud the efforts to try to slow that train down in terms of getting cell phones into the hands of our young people. But I do think that we need to do more research to really understand that. So I think that beyond just having cell phone bans and restrictions in schools, and they look so different across the country from district to district and school to school, classroom to classroom, in fact, that I think that we need to think about, what this really is looking like in the entire day of an adolescent and a high schooler. We know that 95% of teens have cell phones and 40% of children between the ages of 8 and 12 have cell phones already. And so we need to be thinking about the hours beyond the school day. What happens when they get those phones back or out of those yonder pouches at 2:30 or 3 o'clock? What is happening to their cell phone usage after that? So I think I'm pushing for more understanding and more research so that we can see the longer term effects in totality on our young people and our children.
Okay, can I respectfully push you a little bit? Just so there's two sides here, because you'll have parents who will say, well, there is evidence, right? There's the mental health. There are kids who have their earbuds in, they're not talking at lunch. They're using ChatGPT underneath their desk when they're taking tests. They're not participating in sports. There's been this disintegration of really just the quality of childhood. And here is an opportunity for us to take away the cell phone, even if it is only for 6 to 8 hours a day. Your response?
My response to that is we know that kids that use their social media more than 3.5 to 5 hours a day, which is about the average, those kids do tend to have more distractibility, more disrupted sleep, and they also tend to have lower academic achievement outcomes. However, as I said, we don't have a randomized gold star randomized study yet that is really definitively saying how cell phone usage and social media and smartphones are really affecting the mental health of our young people. And so I'm really advocating for that. I'm not saying that parents shouldn't say that, but I'd also say that there is a whole group of parents that want their kids to have the cell phones, which I think is interesting, but those parents feel that they need to have 24/7 access to their kids. They feel as though they want to be able, in this era of school safety and school shootings, they want to be able to have access to their kids in case something happens. We know that last September, during the first month of school, there was a shooting in Georgia, and parents pointed to that incident repeatedly as a reason why they wanted their kids to keep their cell phones. So another thing that I'm also saying is that, we need to really rethink what having a cell phone means, because we need to, I think, look at allowing our children to have cell phone privileges, but taking away the smartphone access. And there is technology that can baffle access to the social media apps that disrupt our kids' days in school. But we need to think about whether or not just having parents have access to their kids' phones is enough, if they can make phone calls or text messages during the school day, if that's enough for parents, or do parents really want their kids to have access to all of these social media apps that we know are disrupting the kids during their school day about 60 times per day during between 8:30 and 2:30. And we know that that's just really racking up in terms of notifications and distractions to make it more difficult for our young people to stay focused and concentrate during the academic.
Yeah, and Kurt, I want to bring you in the conversation. I was actually one of the first reporters on scene in Winder, Georgia, and I remember a lot of the parents waiting for their kids, but they were able to contact them. Which, why do I bring that up? Because it's valid, right? And I hear you. What you're saying, I think it's valid. A lot of the parents were able to say to me, and I could see their hands shaking, well, they're okay, and they had their text message. They were showing me that. So Kurt, we walk this fine line, right? I have to be in contact with my children. I tell everyone I think I need them more than they need me. So is that a deeper issue here? Are you okay? Kurt, you have a sixth grader. Do you talk to your sixth grader when they're at school? Tell me about what you're working through if your school does in fact ban cell phones.
Yeah, they're at a school that is kind of a no technology school. And I think that, again, you can take something too far to the extreme where it becomes counterproductive and unhelpful. One of the things that's just a reality at the time that we live in is technology is a core tenet of our society now, both in terms of our economy, the way that professionals are changing the way that they do their jobs with the integration of technology. I'd like to see schools approach this in a way in which they actually start adapting technology into the curriculum to show them the productive, positive ways cell phones, smart apps, tablets, whatever can be used in your future. I think that when you make something taboo just for making it taboo, you're already kind of rallying up the natural kid instinct to rebel against you and against any rule that kids want to do something so bad just because you're not allowed to. Well, if you remove that stressor, they become a little bit less about, oh, I'm doing this because I'm not supposed to, and more like, well, what's the actual real functionality of this? I think that there is a fine balance between having technology, how you quality control that. We all as parents have the ability to control what is on our children's phones, apps, tablets, whatever. And so I think that there's a big difference in having access to a certain level of technology and having them have a social media presence, which I personally don't think is a great idea for anyone under not in at least high school to have a social media profile, because nothing good is going to come of that in your life in general. If they had, and I think most of us would agree with this, social media when we were going through that era, none of us would have jobs right now. We all would have been canceled. And so I think that we have to find that right balance of, yeah, I think it's important, especially in these days, to have that tech that touch point with your kid to know that they are okay or safe, because anything can happen right now, and we live in a time, unfortunately, where we can't guarantee safety. And as a parent, I can't think of anything more gut wrenching than something happening and not being able to reach my kid and know that they are okay. Like, that would be I have for any parent that has that position, and that is the key driver. Why I completely empathize with that. I understand that instinct as a parent to want to be able to make sure your kid's okay at any point in time. There's a practicality there. But I also agree that, well, we don't want everyone having their cell phones out in the middle of the classroom. Like, we got to have boundaries. We got to have some semblance to protect the academic setting so that they aren't being dinged with notifications. And it's very simple. If you bring this phone out of your backpack, if your notification goes off, you lose that privilege. You lose the response. You have to show that you can have this responsibly, which I think as a parent we're all trying to teach our kids ultimately. What, like, we all know one day you're going to have a phone. I mean, that's just a fact of life. We want to make sure that when that time comes, you can understand it is a responsibility, and it can be taken away if you abuse that responsibility. And so, again, I don't think there's a perfect answer to this. I do think, though, if you go too far to the extreme, it will spur that rebellious nature in our kids, especially as they hit that middle school puberty, wanting to rage against the parents all the time, gene that they all have. And so we should be mindful of that as we set policy.
And I think it's going to be interesting as it plays out, right? We talk about these 31 states. As you mentioned, either they have the yonder patches or cell phone hotels, or it's bell to bell. It's not unified. Mark, when I said it was apples to oranges when we talk about the Wait Till Eighth campaign and then the cell phone ban, it's because the Wait Till Eighth campaign is essentially, like you said, it's all volunteer based. So you're getting these signatures every day. That's a whole lot different from a cell phone ban. I'm getting the sense with some of the parents who I've spoken to, yes, there is the fear of violence, but it's also the don't tread on me, right? This is my personal device. This is my personal choice. And I'm sending my kid to a public school. I pay taxes. you can't take away my cell phone. Your response to that?
Well, I think fundamentally a collective action problem requires a collective action solution. So, one of the biggest reasons that kids get smartphones is because everybody else has one. And so, by banding together as parents through the Wait Until Eighth pledge, we can help reduce some of that pressure both for parents and for kids so that we're not taking something away from them. Our website at waituntil8th.org lists a number of smartphone alternatives as well as conversation starters for contracts that you as parents and kids can have, because as we were just talking about, this is something that's going to come up in their lives, and so it's important to be a family that is having this conversation holistically and discussing what do we want technology to play in our lives, what is the goal here. And I think what you can discover, and this is why smartphone alternatives are really important, that a lot of the need to just stay in touch and, hey, I need a ride back from soccer practice, can be done with a simple flip phone, an Apple Watch. Yeah, even an AirTag can help solve some simple, basic staying in touch questions. But I think our premise as Wait Until Eighth is that we can band together as parents to help support our kids and support ourselves as parents, help make this decision a
Hmm.
little bit easier.
I do think I gotta say the Apple Watch is like a great one catch all solution in my opinion because you can do a quick text, hey, I'm okay. Hey, I forgot my book at home. Can you come bring that? Those type of logistical details, and have the ability to like geo track and all of that. Like, I'm a big fan of using the Apple Watch.
The other thing I think is an important point to add here is Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, I think is a must read for every parent watching this conversation. But I think one of the things that underlines is the need for childhood independence and the need for kids to fail a little bit. And you know what? If they forget their book at home, that's okay. How many of us forgot our books at home when we were in the fifth or sixth grade, right? That happens. And I think that's an important part of childhood is letting kids be kids a little bit longer.
So one thing I'd also like to just quickly point out is that there are economic differences. So when say that you want kids that have access to an Apple Watch to be able to use that in lieu of a smartphone, that's great. And so kids that have access to more resources, they probably have a tablet, they probably have a laptop, they probably have an iPhone and an iPad and all of those things. But kids that don't have access to as many resources have a higher degree of reliance on their smartphones. And so I think that's why you see that there's just a little bit of dissonance in how these cell phone bans are applied in districts that tend to be wealthier versus districts that tend to have more need. And I think that the policies that we make have to be respectful of that as well, because there are kids that if you take their cell phone away, it doesn't matter because they have access to all of these other devices. And then you're going to be in some districts where taking the cell phone away when it is maybe the primary source of communication or the only source of communication. And sometimes it's a source of communication that one child in a household relies on, or it could be several children in a household that rely on that one device. So I think that as we think about these policies, we have to be strategic and trying to be as broad as possible to reach as many stakeholder audiences as are involved. Thanks.
So Dr. Anderson, can you elaborate a little bit? What would you like to see? This is something you're more well than any of us, right? You brought up a point before we started recording. Not only, that the economic differences is poignant, but also the technology is growing fast. We simply aren't for help. Like you said, it's not just it's AI.
Yes.
It's into every aspect of our children's lives. Oh, I'm an 80s baby. We
Yes.
didn't have that. We never had a smartphone.
No.
It was never part of the complicated era that we were raised
Yes.
in.
Yes. I remember, I can think about, picking up the phone and my mother, later picking up the phone and saying, it's time to get off. You've been on for 30 minutes. Or aging myself. But, kids don't have those kind of disruptions, right? You couldn't pick up the phone if the phone clicked in and your mother's friend called, you had to give the phone to your parent, right? So things are very different in terms of how we are rearing our kids. We don't have as much, even though I hear what you're saying, that parents have the capacity to look into all of this different software and technology that's on our kids' devices. We don't see as much of the interaction that's happening between our kids and these platforms. And as I said, AI is really making a run. The Silicon Valley technology development is far outpacing our capacity to keep up with it. Now there is a There is a new software that can help your child self-soothe them back to sleep. So, in helping parents to get a full night's sleep, parents don't have to get up because there's a device that can be right in your child's room and it can soothe your child back to sleep. But what else is happening is they're giving your child these soothing messages about going back to sleep. What other messages are being given? So I think we just have to have an awareness that there are two sides to both of this. The other thing that I'm quite honestly concerned about with all of the proliferation of all this software and these apps is really that we really need more civility and teaching digital character education. So you're talking to a former principal, a former school teacher, charter school founder, and I think about how we used to focus on kindness and well-being of our young people, and being able to help our young people make good choices and having strong character outcomes. But what's happening now is that you get likes for being mean. You get likes for trolling. You get likes for being uncivil to others. And so I think that what we have to also think about is a real significant code of character, digital character education, if you will, so that we can think about, like, how should our young people be on these platforms where people are getting likes for posting things that are unkind or uncivil to one another? Because if our schools are not actively teaching this, and if parents are not as thoughtful, because parents are so busy these days about being explicit about this, I think that we're missing a real opportunity to really reshape this conversation about how to use this digital technology for good. So that's one thing I really would like to see.
I think the Netflix smash hit Adolescence was again a must watch for everybody who's watched this conversation, and I think it really shines a light on what you were just talking about, which is this is something that parents have to be providing kids guidelines. I mean, it's no different from teaching your child to drive when they're 16, right? We have to provide responsible guidelines, responsible use, and that's again why the Wait Until Eighth pledge I think is so powerful, because it's about parents bonding together with each other, and also looking at the contracts that we can sign as parents with our kids and saying, look, here's what we're going to do, and I'm guilty of this too. We have to put down the smartphone at dinner time. We have to make sure that no smartphones in the bedrooms. Those are things that we as parents can model, because otherwise the show Adolescence really shows some of the negative consequences that can happen from unregulated use from kids and teenagers.
Yeah, and Kurt, I want to bring you in the conversation. I know that I've actually started filling up my kids' schedules, and they keep asking why they're involved in so many things. And I'm so afraid for idle time because, like you were saying, Dr. Anderson, I mean, my daughter's flirting with middle school, and
Yes.
I already see the reinforcement with negative behavior. So, Kurt, you have a middle schooler. I mean, are you walking that line as well? Because we're all, like you said, we're all just doing the best we can. We're trying to get.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it, and I say this with absolutely no judgment for any parent out there. Like, it is tough to just keep your head above water. At the end of the day, breaking even is coming out ahead, is how I feel most of the time. I think part of it is as parents, especially parents from a different generation, as we all, I grew up in the 80s as well. So, the most complicated piece of technology I had was a Walkman. Um, and a Game Boy. So very different than now. I think part of it is trying to carve out the time as parents to also kind of meet our kids where they are. And so here at our house, we make a point that, almost every night, the way that we end the day, whatever's gone on, is, for 30 minutes in the living room on the couch, all of us are playing the same game on the tablet together. And that allows us to go into their world as their parents and say, okay, how does this work? Like, how do you interface with other people? You're not just mindlessly playing with some stranger on the internet. You're playing with your younger brother, mom and dad, and I think that to me is the 21st century equivalent of what it used to be when we used to play Monopoly growing up. Like, the four of us are together. We are we're playing freeze tag on Roblox. I mean, we're playing hide and seek. It's like those type of games, and we have found that to be incredibly bonding, and it's been helpful for the kids to see us not just poo-pooing technology and being a little out of touch. It's no, no, we're going to meet you where you are. We're going to meet where you like to play, and we're going to make it okay. We're going to make it a safe space. And then that's what allows us to later on go like, hey, like, so you got a bunch of text messages from this group chat you're on with your friends. Like, what are you guys talking about? And they know that we're coming at it from a place of non-judgment, from a place of acceptance. And I think so it's so hard to walk that line of non-judgment and acceptance with preteens, particularly because they're looking for any excuse to shut you out. They are naturally trying to pull away, have that independence. Our 11-year-old is very private now, for lack of a better term. But yet at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, he still voluntarily comes out to living room because he knows, like, hey, we're all going to play together and we're going to have a good time, and we're going to do it in this space that you want to occupy more time. And we're still trying to rein it in. We're still trying to manage it and have those boundaries. But I think that's part of the key for this conversation about just technology, with kids, is I think too many parents, they read a book by Jonathan Haidt, but they've never actually spent time on the platform. They've never actually spent time with their kids playing the game to see how do they do this. And I think it goes a long way of building that credibility with them when you do want to moderate, when you do want to instill some boundaries, that they go, okay, you're not just a hater, you're not just being an aged out parent, or I mean, there's a whole new vocabulary that goes with these. I mean, the amount of times I hear in our living room someone yell "Skippity Riz Toilet Ohio," and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Uh, you know, Meeting them halfway.
You know what? Dr. Anderson, I kind of want to give you the last word here, because I'm listening to Kurt, and first of all, it's hysterical, and also I love the investment that you're putting in your kids. What keeps on flashing in my mind is, okay, but we all need to do that. And Dr. Anderson, I would imagine you're the first to argue that not all kids are getting that investment.
No, and I would also say that even with all of my advocacy around this work and paying attention, being a hands-on parent as best as I can, one of my own kids was catfished. And it was a significant situation where we had to like pull our family together and figure out how to help my kiddo because they had gotten themselves into something in over their heads. And it wasn't because we as parents in our home weren't paying attention. So it just goes to show you that this technology is just so broad and wide and deep. And so I also would say that, one of the things that we also need to just keep in mind is that we pushed these cell phones into our kids' hands at the beginning of the pandemic because we thought it was a tool to keep them connected. And when we did that, we didn't have many rules. We didn't have much oversight. And now I think we're finally realizing, we may have gone too far with doing that. And so now we're trying to reel it back. And I think it's trying to like put a genie back into the bottle a little bit. So I would just say that, parents have to be hands-on. They have to pay attention. And I think that there are roles for our government to have oversight. There's roles for school boards to look at where these new policies have gaps. High school policies should be different than middle school policies, should be different than elementary age policies, for example. And I think that sometimes districts are not thinking through some of the nuances of that. But I do think that the effort that we are all making is all going in the right direction.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm so grateful that the three of you joined me, Dr. Anderson, Mark, Kurt. I couldn't be more grateful. Of course, these are rolling out this school year. As I mentioned, 31 states. We did see some last year as well. So I think my goal really is probably just to reconnect with you three, maybe in a year or two, because we saw what happened after COVID, as you mentioned, Dr. Anderson. So let's just see how it really rolls out in all these different states, because they're all different. But I'm grateful for your time. And I think the big takeaway is, listen, we're all just doing the best we can, aren't we? We are. So thank you all. I'm so grateful for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.